Senate Taxes Committee. It is Wednesday, March 4th. Oh, well, 8:30. Yeah, I know. I'm, oh, that clock is slow. It is 8:32. Quorum is present. The minutes are before you. Are there corrections or additions? Seeing none, the minutes are approved as presented. Today, we are going to be taking up Senate File 3596. We're going to start by welcoming Senator Port and whatever opening comment she may want to make. But I'm thinking in terms of, even though this is not the committee of origin, to get the bill, the basic bill, the DE amendment, before us to start with, so that is the bill that you can speak to. Senator Dibble is not here, so Senator Housechild will offer that amendment, and then we will continue with, we'll get that in front of us. We'll hear a little bit of testimony, and then we will hear the rest of the amendments. So Senator Housechild offers the A11. Senator Port, if you would take us through it section by section, and then if Ms. Bursch has additional comments to add in terms of explanation, feel free to ask her to do that.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So we have before us the A11. Senator Port.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. In front of you is the A11. Section 1 is the appropriation. It establishes a one-time emergency rental assistance aid program for counties and tribal governments to provide emergency rental assistance to eligible households.
Senator Port?
Yes.
Actually, Section 1 is the definitions.
Oh, you're right. I apologize.
Yeah, okay.
It puts the, yes.
Same language, but just reordered.
This section is effective the day after enactment. In subdivision 1, the definitions, it defines commissioner, household, eligible household, emergency rental assistance, median rent, and tribal governments. Subdivision 2 requires that the Commissioner of Revenue calculate the emergency rental assistance aid payable to each county and tribal government. Aid to these counties is calculated using the county distribution formula for local homeless prevention aid, which is an ongoing normal program, and just uses that same calculation. Aid to tribal governments is calculated by dividing the total amount appropriated for aid to tribal governments equally among the 11 federally recognized tribal governments in Minnesota. Subdivision 3 requires counties and tribal governments to use emergency rental assistance aid to provide an amount of emergency rental assistance no greater than a maximum established for each jurisdiction for households that meet certain residency, income, and housing status criteria. Emergency rental assistance must be administered by a county, a group of contiguous counties joined together, a city, a group of contiguous cities, a tribal government, a group of tribal governments, or one of the community-based nonprofits that are authorized to do FHPAP in its current form. Subdivision 4 is on data privacy. It establishes that the applicant data is non-public. Subdivision 5 requires that, to the extent that's permitted by federal law, emergency rental assistance must not be considered income, assets, or personal property for the purposes of determining eligibility for state public assistance. Subdivision 6 requires that the Commissioner of Revenue distribute emergency rental assistance aid to counties and tribes and certify the maximum amount of emergency rental assistance each eligible household may receive within 15 days of the effective date of this section. Subdivision 7 appropriates $40 million in fiscal year 2026 from the general fund to the Commissioner of Revenue for this emergency rental assistance aid. That is divided into $35.2 million for counties and $4.8 for tribal governments. Subdivision 8 requires counties and tribal governments to submit information regarding the distribution of emergency rental assistance to households. So this is reporting within 3 months of the spending deadline for the Commissioner of Revenue to aggregate and submit a report to the legislature within 5 months of spending. And then Section 2 is the cancellation of $40 million of $109 million appropriation in fiscal year 2024. This is the Tyler settlement money in terms of the state's retention of tax forfeited lands. And this section, again, is effective the date after enactment. And that is the overview of the DE. If folks have questions, happy to take those or see if Ms. Birch has additional to add.
Ms. Birch, is there any particular part of this that we should pay attention to that was different from because it's a DE to the first engrossment, so I just want to make sure that we're catching every change that's made here.
Madam Chair, no, I think Senator Port's
Okay.
walkthrough covers all the pertinent details.
Thank you very much. With regard to the Tyler funds, there is going to be an amendment to how that process works, and Mr. Nauman is going to be asked to make comments about that too when we get to that point. Before we take questions or comments from the members, do you want to explain explain the bill further? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, Minnesota saw more than 25,000 evictions in 2025, the highest number in state history. At the same time, more families than ever are struggling to afford the cost of living, from groceries to healthcare. Affordability is a real struggle for a lot of Minnesotans. The cost of housing is higher than ever in Minnesota, and this investment is critically needed to ensure that Minnesotans in every community across the state have a safe and stable place to call home. Providing foundation of housing stability allows families everywhere to spend money that is currently a cost burden for households on healthcare, education, groceries, car repairs, and any other number of essential needs. Homelessness prevention needs across the state are higher than ever, especially in the light of threats to the continuum of care and housing choice voucher programs, which threatens to more than double homelessness across Minnesota. At this moment, Madam Chair, we are on the edge of an eviction crisis, and it is affecting families all across our state. And our hope is to move this emergency rental assistance quickly. It is not new money, it is existing money to get out to folks to help keep people stably housed, because we know that once they fall into homelessness, the cost to the state is significantly greater to get them rehomed.
Thank you, Senator Port. Are there questions or comments for her at this point? Senator Weber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this point, it would appear that the $40 million was established just because it's there. What is the estimate of the actual need of this type of money?
Senator Port.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Weber, for that question. We got an update from Twin Cities, Greater Twin Cities United Way, who runs the 211 call line that answers rent help questions all across the state. And they, combined with legal aid, expect that the need for the next 3 months, which is sort of the goal of this bill, is $75 million.
Senator Weber, was that your actual question?
Well, yes, I mean,
Okay, just want to make sure I
my
understand.
question was, what is the actual expected need?
I see.
mean,
Okay.
Because the 40 million just happens to be there, that's the number
I
that was
see.
put in. Yep, one further question.
Sure. Senator Weber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In regards to this program and in light of recent developments in Minnesota, what provisions are made to combat fraud within this program?
Thank you, Senator Weber. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Ford.
I do also have folks from MHFA and DOR here to talk about program integrity, but what I can tell you is the funding distribution mechanism in this bill, we carefully decided how this goes out, is well established. These are providers, either counties or groups of cities, or in some cases, nonprofits, particularly in greater Minnesota, where the counties don't have enough staff. This is a well-established program. It's been over 10 years we've been running this program, and it has many safeguards meant to prevent fraud. Local homelessness prevention aid is a tested way to support local communities and to prevent homelessness. This bill includes strong reporting requirements as well that will give a clear picture of exactly how this money is spent. But these are long-tested programs that do not have a history of fraud. Both the initial providers are vetted and accredited each year, and there is safeguards to between eligibility and being able to use the state's own like other programs that they may have applied for, WIC or SNAP, those sorts of things, to verify the household.
Senator Port, are there reports available that are financial audits or audited reports that go to the state auditor, as well as whatever nonprofits or community organizations in greater Minnesota? Do they file their reports of how they go about making these distributions? And are those reports available to the public?
Madam Chair, I believe so, but if I may bring up the MHFA, Assistant Commissioner Baumtrag, who oversees all the reports.
Okay, we're gonna wait on him until
Okay.
we see if there's other questions to start with, because I think when we put on some of the amendments,
Yes.
that might become a little bit clearer about the protections and provisions that emphasize prevention of fraud by the information that is required by those who claim to be eligible. So, Senator Weber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One final question. I was sitting here thinking about back during the COVID situation, there was additional money placed into this program. And if I remember correctly, payments were made directly to apartment owners, to utility companies, et cetera, for that. Is the same process going to be done in this situation as well?
Senator Weber, I think we sent you a summary, all the members, a summary of the legislative auditor's performance audit of Brent Help Men, and we can certainly, when that person comes forward, ask them about the findings. Basically, an okay job, but a lot of holes in it.
Okay,
So
thank you.
we can pursue that then as well. That's
Madam
okay.
Chair, if I may.
Sure.
I will also say that that program through COVID was Rent Help MN, It was a different program built specifically for that time because we had $600 million in federal funds. This program that we're looking at right now is just to go through our regular existing emergency rental assistance programs like local homeless aid and FHPAP. It is not like Rent Help, which was sort of stood up independently. This is through our existing state programs.
Any others? Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just not a specific question, but just kind of an overall comment. I was just thinking about the fact that we are, in this particular bill, taking money from, it's like not new money, is what I heard you say. And the thing is, okay, so it's coming from that Tyler settlement, but the thing is, typically, it would just return to the general fund if we did not take that Tyler settlement money today, first of all, is what I understand. If that's not correct, then the rest of my comment is not.
Not precisely correct.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll be maybe a
We
little,
can explain
yeah, I'll
further
maybe be a
about
little
when we get to
imprecise.
the A18, how that mechanism for the cancellation and the transfer and so forth of those dollars and where those dollars are right now. And they're actually not in the general fund.
So, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is maybe not quite as precise, but the overall feeling I have is that would it not be better if these funds were to cancel and go back to the general fund because they weren't used? Would it not be better that it go back to the general fund where all the things that this legislature is being called upon to do would compete? And so I do know there's been a few other cases where we have identified particular pots of money, but it seems that, well, I appreciate the other aid packages that are in here, like the statewide student homelessness prevention. I realize we're building upon that. I just wanted to note that it seems like it'd be a better process if we let these cancel to the general fund and then fight or debate how all those dollars should be used instead of selecting right here for this. So it's just a comment, and I know we'll learn more later.
And Senator Nelson, I think when we get to the amendments, that will be an opportunity to have a wider discussion of what their impact is on Senator Port's bill, including the funding source.
Thank you.
Senator Port, anything further before we go to Senator Drazkowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for bringing the bill, Senator Port. So on 1.12, you say that it's for people who experienced financial hardship. Can you describe to us what financial hardship means here?
What are you referring to the A11?
Yes, Madam Chair.
And what, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what line you said there.
1.12.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I'm curious.
Thank you.
I'm curious what is the financial hardship and what caused it?
Senator Port.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Drazkowski. I think financial hardship is sort of straightforward. It exists in many of our existing programs to help folks in need. If you are experiencing a loss of job or an injury that's inability to work, if your business has no employees and you can't stay open, if you have, whatever the existing normal of your life is overturned and you experience a financial hardship because of that, then you are eligible for this program.
So, Madam Chair.
Senator Drazkowski.
Well, I'm confused, Senator Port. I mean, the bill says emergency rental assistance. What is the emergency? What are the events that brought the emergency? The original bill, before it was amended, I think this was another ICE bill, right? We don't like ICE, Orange Man bad. That's what I understood this bill to be. Is that what this is about? Is it about the last couple of months and the choice by many Minnesotans to go out and interfere with ICE in their enforcement of the law?
Senator Port.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Senator Drazkowski. This is about the economic impact that people of Minnesota are feeling. There are Minnesotans across this state who have experienced a significant economic downturn in the past 6 months. We know that because the numbers are going up at rent, the 211 number, at calls to legal aid, at calls to Homeline. They're experiencing between a 60 and 80% increase in calls for rental assistance. I don't know why all of that is happening. I'm certain that some of it is because of federal impacts on Minnesota. I've been, chairing a subcommittee on that, and we have heard from Minnesotans for lots of reasons over the last 6 months that are experiencing hardships, including insurance that went up 2,000% for some people, loss of income because of health insurance costs, because of loss of SNAP benefits, because, yes, ICE has been in our cities. That had a significant impact on a large portion of our population, but we're also hearing from folks like the miners up in Senator Hochschild's district who are experiencing significant financial hardships. This does not require people to have a specific reason why they're experiencing those hardships, just that they are, and we, as the legislature in Minnesota, are responding to that need.
I would also point out that on line 112, that we, Senator Port set the date for the beginning of this impact well before ICE, the ICE Metro surge began, but tariffs were already in place, and so that's been certainly an impact generally on not just businesses, but individuals as well. So I think I would just comment that it is more of a general malaise, quite frankly, of our economy, affected by many things, not specifically the day that 3,000 ICE agents came into the metropolitan area. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Port, direct financial support, so this just means straight cash. Is that what that is?
Senator Port.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is rental assistance. So it is specifically rental assistance that is, yes, dollars that is given to the folks who apply. Just like our regular rental assistance programs through FHPAP, local homeless prevention aid, this is set up to mirror our existing programs.
So, Madam.
Senator Drazkowski and Senator Port. Also, it includes support for utility
Yes.
obligations, which go hand in hand with ability to meet paying the rent. So utilities and assistance, the dollars can go for those two things. Paying the rent, which means you have to be a renter, and paying for rent and utilities.
So, Madam Chair,
Senator Drazkowski.
I do have the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
What's that?
I do have the floor then. I was just curious whether I had
Oh,
the
I'm
floor or
coming
not.
back, but I'm going to comment too, Senator Drazkowski. Have you ever known me not to?
I think you're doing better on time than I am, Madam Chair. Wondering, Senator Port, can illegal aliens get this money?
Senator Port.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is not a documentation test for this money, if that's what you are referring to. But I will say, Operation Metro Surge in specific has affected the safety and economic well-being of citizens and people with all sorts of lawful status, not just undocumented, in addition to those who are documented. 71% of people who've been detained by ICE have no criminal record of any kind. And as of a month ago, people who came from Haiti and sought asylum and received lawful refugee status here in the United States. Then about 2.5 weeks ago, the president attempted to take that legal status away through a tweet, which is, according to the courts, legal, how we do, how the president speaks with an official voice in this country. And so if you have legal status today, there is nothing at this moment that guarantees that you have legal status tomorrow. That was done literally on a whim in a tweet. And so there is no documentation test because, as we discussed in my committee, what documented and undocumented meant was different depending on the hour in this country.
So
Senator
Madam Chair.
Drazkowski.
Thank you, Senator Port. So I mean, initially, as I started asking questions, this was not about the conflicts where people threw themselves in danger's way over the last couple of months, and where we saw paramilitary organizations operating signal chat groups and dispatching people in between ICE and their ability or their efforts to arrest people who are criminal illegal aliens in this state. But indeed, now that's what I'm hearing is what this bill is about. And that's the discussion I've been hearing from the author and the chair about the bill, who both know about this bill much more than I do. So if this is about giving money to people to pay their rent who experience some sort of financial hardship during the last few months, when we had ICE in this state trying to clean up the mess that we've created here by harboring people who are criminals, which has happened not only this last year, Madam Chair, but the Democrats have done this here for the entire 4 years that I've been here, 3 years for sure that I've been here. And we have painted ourselves into this mess. But that's a side comment. And I'm wondering, so if indeed the claim of the author and Democrats is they grab more tax money from hardworking Minnesotans and give it to people, in this case, who are saying that they were unable to work or they didn't want to work. I'm not sure what it was. They were scared to work is what Democrats are saying. We have the paid family leave program. So, Madam Chair, I think you know, or Senator Port, sorry. She just got a promotion, Madam Chair.
So Senator Drazkowski, just watch us not take the bait.
It wasn't deliberate, Madam Chair, it was not. So the paid family leave program, which, I mean, we're paying people apparently not to work with this bill is what I'm understanding. They didn't work and they've got a financial hardship because of that conscious decision not to work. And the taxpayers of Minnesota with this bill are going to be forced to pay them money for not working. Now, we've got this paid family leave program. The taxes hardworking Minnesotans that are out there, Senator Port and Madam Chair, working hard right now to pay the taxes to accumulate here in St. Paul for this government to then distribute to people who don't work or don't want to work for up to 20 weeks. So my question is, don't they have access to the paid family leave, Senator Port? You know, there's mental health and, you know, all kinds of, you know, bonding and everything else that they can use that money for. They can use it for all kinds of things. So can't they use that money for this? Are they able to access that money for these last 3 months?
Senator Drazkowski, I'm going to call on Senator Nelson, and then we're going to move toward the other amendments. Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a brief question for Senator Port. I'm looking at the A11, I finally got that in front of me here. On 1.23, oh no, actually, that isn't the part I was looking at. My question had to do with the fact that I understand in the A11 that any of this assistance would not be counted as income. And my question, okay, first of all, confirm if that's accurate, and then maybe my question is not needed.
Madam Chair.
Senator Port.
Senator Nelson, it's not counted as income specifically for eligibility to state programs. So if they are also on WIC or SNAP, but not for tax reasons.
That answers my question. Thank you.
We're going to proceed then to the other amendments. And, but first, we have before us the House Trial Amendment, A11. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Senator Housechild, move that to you. And then we'll start on the other amendments. And I think the first one is where's the agenda? Is, or, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment.
Madam Chair, I believe you have the A15.
Yes, if
Go ahead.
members would be directed to the A15. One of the things that is covered in the way in which the money is distributed through 47730 dot A is an emphasis on the vulnerability of children becoming homeless. That's a major thread throughout that whole section of the already established law that Senator Port has referred to with regard to rental assistance. So if you look on the A2, I mean the A11, page 2, after line 11, we're also going to make, or I'm proposing that we make a statement about priority when those funds are not going to be unlimited. There is a limited amount that, whether it is the county or other agencies out in the community, as Senator Port mentioned, particularly in greater Minnesota, with the limited funds that they will have, we're asking them to, in fact, requiring them to prioritize potential recipients with children. Any discussion of that amendment? Sorry, I keep forgetting.
Any discussion on the A15 amendment? Okay, seeing none. Senator Port, anything on the amendment?
Thank you, Chair Housechild. This is a good narrowing of the use of funds because we know it won't cover the full need. So I support this amendment.
Okay. Those in favor of the A15 say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. A15 passes.
Mr.
Chair
Chairman?
Resta, yep,
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I move the A16 amendment.
Senator Rest moves the A16 amendment. Please go ahead and describe it.
Thank you. And this is a kind of an adjustment of maximums, minimums, et cetera. And Senator Port, I'm going to ask counsel, since it is a page in line and it's not engrossed, if, Mr. Chairman, if you would ask Ms. Bursch if she would go through it so that people can understand how it is engrossed.
Please, Ms. Bursch, go ahead and describe the amendment.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Rest, so the A16 amendment amends the reporting requirement in subdivision 8 of the A11 based on some feedback from the legislative auditor. So the specific changes that it makes, first, it requires that counties and tribal governments submit their reporting broken down by each entity that administers the rental assistance on their behalf. So because other entities like cities and community-based nonprofits can administer the assistance, it will be broken down for each of those that do so. In addition, it adds a requirement that counties and tribes report on how many households that receive assistance include at least one minor. It also amends the reporting on the average amount of emergency rental assistance that each recipient household gets to be the minimum, median, and maximum amounts. And it adds one new reporting requirement that they state the number of households to which the maximum amount of emergency rental assistance allowed was distributed. So you'll see in subdivision 3 of the A11, there is a maximum amount of emergency rental assistance that each eligible household can receive established, equal to an amount no greater than 5 times the median rent for the county or tribal area where that household's primary residence is located. And then finally, this A16 amendment also requires that the report be submitted to the legislative auditor in addition to the chairs and ranking minority members of Housing and Taxes.
Thank you, Ms. Bursch. Any questions for Ms. Bursch or Senator Rest? We'll go to Senator Port if you have any comments about the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Rest. I think these are smart additional safeguards on the reporting, and I appreciate it also going to the legislative auditor. That's a great idea.
Okay, any discussion on the amendment before we vote? Seeing none, those in favor of the A16 say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The A16 is adopted. Senator Rest to the
Chairman.
A17.
Mr. Chairman, I offer the A17 amendment.
Senator Rest introduces the A17. Go ahead and describe it if you can.
Mr. Chairman, there, among the 11 tribes that this assistance is going to be distributed, there are some that have very few, maybe even 1 or 2, because of the nature of their organization and of their tribal nation. Rent in and of itself, rental assistance in and of itself is not particularly helpful to their situation. And so I'm also now going, because numbers in here, I'm going to ask Ms. Bursch to explain how this amendment addresses that fact about our, about the census, about renters on the reservations, and the tribe property and so forth.
Ms. Bursch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Russ, so when I sat down to do this modeling for the A11, which includes an estimate of projected maximum assistance per eligible household, I realized that a median gross rent figure was not available for Prairie Island Indian community specifically. So I reached out to the Department of Revenue and asked, in this case where data are not available, what would you do? And they said that it would be unadministrable and advised that language be added to correct for that. So instead of, so in the event that data is not available for any county or tribal, well, specifically for tribal governments, a proxy would be used that averages the median rent for the counties where that tribal land is located instead. So for Prairie Island Indian Community, you can see on page 4 of the modeling, under the A11, the median gross rent and maximum assistance per eligible household numbers are currently blank. But if the A17 amendment were to be adopted to correct for that missing data, those figures would be the average of Dakota County and Goodhue counties, where Prairie Island is located. So their median gross rent would be $1,257, and the projected maximum per household would be $6,285 if the A17 were to be adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Bursch. Any questions for her? Okay. Senator Port?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Rest. I think this is an elegant solution to some data that we just simply don't have.
Okay. Any final discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, those in favor of the A17, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The A17 is adopted. We'll go to Chair Rest for a final amendment, A18.
Mr. Chairman, I move the A18.
Chair Rest moves the A18. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, this does reference the situation for where the Tyler funds are now segregated, and it is not in the general fund. And I would ask Mr. Nauman if he would come forward and explain what has happened to that settlement money, what the gross amount was, how it has moved from the general fund into a claims fund, and why this amendment is necessary to bring that money back that is referred to already in the A11. Mr. Nauman, if you would, Mr. Chairman, if you would ask Mr. Nauman to take us through that. And I think in particular that might help or be useful information to Senator Nelson.
Yeah. Mr. Nauman, please proceed.
Mr. Chair, Senators, good morning. It's good to see all of you. It's been a while since I've testified in front of the Tax Committee. It's nice to be back. Senator Rest is indeed correct. In 2024, the legislature enacted what we loosely call the Tyler Bill that ultimately became Chapter 113. This was becomes legal rapidly, and if it becomes a need to talk about the legal aspects of this, I'm going to phone Mr. Sylvia because he was involved in that bill with me and one other counsel in our office. But the purpose of the bill was essentially to settle claims associated with the Tyler settlement coming out of a U.S. Supreme Court finding. And at the time, it was estimated that $109 million would be needed. That was our best guess at the time to make settlement claims. And a settlement under the terms of the language of the bill, or the now law, the Attorney General appointed a settlement administrator. And after the law was enacted, all $109 million was transferred to the settlement administrator and for the purposes of settling any claims that fit the tests under the language of what became a contract, as well as the language of the law. As I said at the outset, the $109 million was our best estimate at the time, and we now believe that that will come in substantially less because there was a deadline, and that deadline has now passed. And getting information from both MMB and the Attorney General's office, the Attorney General's office being primary in this circumstance because they're the ones that liaise with the county administrator or with the claims administrator. We believe there's between $35 and $45 million that will, under the language of the existing law, be transferred back to the state on June 30th, 2026. What this amendment does is effectively go through the process of canceling $40 million of that, the midpoint of the range. But it's different than we would do in normal finance setting where the money still resides in the state treasury, as Senator Rest made reference to. Instead, the language requires, and I think this is best practice, to tell the administrator to credit that money back to the state, return that money that will be unused, bring it back to the state so that the state can then in turn cancel it. So Madam Chair, I'll pause there. This can get very financy very quick, and I'll just pause and see if there are questions.
Are there questions for Mr. Nauman about this process? I think of it as just, it's clawing that money back that's been, put under the bed someplace, and, but that is still useful to us. And this is the way to accomplish it, that has no impact on the forecast, doesn't raise any taxes in order to institute Senator Port's rental assistance program, and it doesn't spend or ask to be spent more than is available reasonably within the Tyler money.
I'll open it up for discussion, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Senator Weber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to make sure I understand, based on the A18 amendment, previously, that money would not have come back to the general fund until June 29th of this year, correct?
Mr. Nauman?
Madam Chair and Senator Weber, I apologize, Mr. Chair and Senator Weber, not quite. Under existing law, under Chapter 113, the Tyler law, the return to the state would be on June 30th, 2026. This language is in some respects is, it requires that to be 1 day earlier. And the reason, not all of it, but 40 million or the amount that's unneeded would come back on June 20th, 2026. Under our budget accounting rules, and this is what I meant when I said it gets financing very quickly, in order for us to track the return of that money to offset the appropriations in the bill, there needs to be language that requires that to happen. So 24 hours earlier is effectively the language that permits fiscal staff, both here and MMB, to track the reduction or to track the return of the dollars into the state treasury.
Senator Weber?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Mr. Chair. Old habits die hard, don't they, Madam Chair? So are we assured and comfortable that all the payments under the Tyler settlement will have been made by that point?
Mr. Chair and Senator Weber, I'm going to answer your question by pointing you to the language on lines 1.10 through 1.11. In part, the reason the date of June 29th was picked was to ensure that there was adequate time for the claims administrator to settle all the claims and before the state pulls the money back into the state treasury. I'm not the expert on what the claims process looks like. That's for the claims administrator. We have received advice from the Attorney General's office that their communication with the claims administrator indicates that based on the claims that they are aware of, that the range is between $35 and $45 million that will ultimately come back to the state under existing law. And this proposal nuances some of our budget rules as well as the law to bring that money back in a day earlier, enabling it to be counted.
Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So looking at when the effective date of the legislation is there, I think it's after enactment, isn't that correct? Are we fronting the money before this money gets back into the general fund at that point?
Mr. Chair, yes, Mr. Chair and Senator Weber, in a sense, yes, the state general fund would basically carry that on a cash flow basis before the cancellation occurs on June 29th under the language of the proposed amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for the further discussion, kind of getting to my question earlier on. So two things come to mind as I hear more about this particular transfer. It does remind me of some of the things that this committee has done in the past to help with that calendaring of the beginning of our new fiscal year, like when we needed more funding, so we asked our businesses to pay the June accelerated sales tax. That was just a calendaring method for us to get the additional payment in early because of our fiscal budget. But that's not but the question that I have really is the fact that it seems to me that, and we've done this a few other times too, where we have found different pots of money, and we've said, and we're going to, and my bill's not going to cost anything because we have these certain pots of money coming in or from certain things. And I know I've done that particularly with tobacco cessation things. But the thing here is, if in fact not all of the funds that had been set aside for the Tyler settlement were needed, it seems that it would be a broader discussion if those funds did get back into the general fund and we disperse it with all the needs, rather than identifying a particular pot to pay with. And I just, we've done it before, but I just think somehow we would have a broader and better budget discussion if we were looking at all of those revenues, and then all of them standing up against all the other competing forces. That's just a comment.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. You know, I would say it's an interesting concept. We could pull this money back and consider all the damage that's been done by the federal government here in Minnesota. We could consider filling in where Medicaid cuts are hurting rural hospitals in my district. We could fill in and address the SNAP cuts that have occurred and food insecurity in our food shelves. So we could use the $40 million for that. We could address housing stability funds that are being frozen at the federal level. We could consider the child care freeze and the threat from the Trump administration to damage our child care centers all across the state, putting families out on the child care that they need in order to go to work every single day. We could address the fact that we have a challenge with some of our critical access hospitals, from HCMC to many of the rural critical access hospitals in my district. We could do rebates for the tariff damage that have impacted families, according to some of the estimates, $1,000 to $2,000 per family. So there are a lot of things that we could consider using this leftover money to address, given the damages that have come down from the federal government and from this administration. I think what Senator Port is saying is we have vulnerable populations who have been damaged and are facing the highest evictions in our state's history, and we're trying to address one of our biggest needs. Now, there are plenty of other needs, and we're gonna hopefully do our best with what we have to address those needs, but at the end of the day, I think Senator Port is leading in this moment when people are very vulnerable and need the support from the state given the damage from the federal level. So hopefully we take this seriously and can pass this bill and make sure that we provide this stability when it's needed most. Senator Rest, I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Port, Senator Nelson. Also, I think with respect to the evictions, they're happening right now. And that is enough for me to say this has to be a priority. It has an urgency. It can be done, and there's a limit of when it must be done in the next 4 months, not waiting until May for final bills to be passed and then having this assistance come into play. It can start happening. It's still going to take some time because we have a bureaucratic process that's deliberate, we hope, and carefully done, that's familiar to us, and we can start that process going in the next week or two as this bill goes through the legislative process, and also in the House as well as the Senate. So I think that's to me, that's where the urgency comes. Although we could do these other things as well, but having people not only be able to stay in their homes, but to feel safe in them, I think, lifts this up above some of the other needs for right now, and does not demand additional taxes to be passed to go along with whatever sum of money. And certainly 40 million is not going to cover, not going to totally wipe out that urgency. So that's why I'm supporting it.
Senator Putnam?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the conversation about both process and potential other uses for this resource, but I would argue there's a certain elegance to it. Because if I'm not mistaken, the Tyler decision was about a failure of the state to deal with housing appropriately. So to me, there's a certain kind of appropriateness in addition to the compelling case that Senator Rest just made for the need dedicated here. I think it also makes sense because we screwed up on housing, so we're going to try and help people with housing. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Senator Drazkowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious if I can state my comments and questions in this committee. Apparently, if they're not liked by the chair, they get cut off. That was my experience recently. So if you're in the majority, you get to tell the minority you don't like their message, you don't like their questions, and you're going to tell them to sit down and shut up. That's what just happened to me, Mr. Chair. And I'm curious maybe to you and Madam Chair, whether we can have an honest discussion about a bill and allow people to state their questions and opinions on a bill without being told to sit down and shut up. That's my question, Mr. Chair.
Senator Drazkowski, none of that language was used. You brought that language into the conversation. We let you ask questions. There was a lot of back and forth. We're working forward on the bill and addressing questions from across the body. So if you have additional questions or anything you'd like to discuss, certainly this is your opportunity.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I haven't seen that type of decorum in this body or the other one that I served in since I've been here 19 years. As I look at the rental assistant to county sheet, the run, if you will. So we have counties that are going to be getting portions of this $40 million of the money from hardworking people who are out there working right now and paying people who ostensibly decided not to work during a particular time for whatever reasons. And Mr. Chair, we have all kinds of welfare programs in the state. We're the biggest welfare state in the country. And we bring forward yet another piece of welfare, up to $7,000 per household in Hennepin County. The taxpayers of Minnesota are going to be paying under this bill to people who are saying, well, I couldn't work because ICE was here enforcing the law. If we pass this bill, that's what this is going to do. It's simply a transfer of wealth from one group of people to another. And maybe Democrats believe in that. You do believe in that. You believe in taking from people who work and earn hard, who work and earn and are hardworking families, and giving it to people who may not want to work or don't work in this situation. We got all kinds of programs where we're paying people not to work. I struggle with that. My constituents struggle with that. And that is what is running our state in the ditch as the rest of the country looks at Minnesota right now, trying to figure out what is going on in this state. What is in the water in Minnesota? I'll save the rest of my comments for the end, Mr. Chair, and I thank you.
Senator Drazkowski, I'd love for you to continue, but if you're done, that sounds okay. Do we have any other discussion? Senator Dibble.
Not rising to the bait, Madam Chair. Just want to say, maybe a little bit. From my perspective, the folks who believe in the transfer of wealth are the Republicans. We see the big whatever bill, which is the largest wealth transfer in the history of our country in one side of one bill that is concentrating ever more of hard-earned tax dollars and people's hard work into fewer and fewer corporate and super wealthy hands. That's the wealth transfer that's occurring in this country right now, and people are suffering because of it. We see repeated attacks by this federal administration on hardworking Minnesotans who need a little bit of help with childcare, with rent, with health care, et cetera, and they're being driven into the ditch individually. So we're just trying to help out a little bit. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other discussion? Senator Drazkowski?
Is it time for amendments, Mr. Chair?
We haven't voted on that yet.
Oh, we're still on one?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll withhold till then. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, we will vote on the A18. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The amendment is adopted. I'll pass the gavel back to Chair Rest.
I understand there are additional amendments. Senator Drazkowski, you've indicated that you have some, so, or at least one. If you would like to offer it now.
I have two amendments, Madam Chair. Okay, the first one is the A19 amendment. I believe it might need to
And
be
the,
passed out.
The pages will distribute the amendment. Please give the first copy to Senator Port. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment, the A19 amendment, repurposes the $40 million that is intended to be spent under this bill, and instead of being used for the intentions in this bill, turns it into a property tax refund. So an additional property tax refund of $40 million to the hardworking people of Minnesota that are trying to pay for their property taxes and struggling as we've got property taxes that are soaring right now throughout Minnesota, largely due to all of the mandates that the Democrats have placed upon them in the last two biennial budgets. So I would ask support of this amendment. It's one that will provide direct property tax relief throughout Minnesota to all parts of Minnesota based on the current structure that we have for property tax refunds. And I'd ask for a roll call, Madam Chair.
Sure. Senator Drazkowski, a comment from me on this. I absolutely agree with you that we have issues with rising property taxes, and some of which are coming about because of mandates from the state, and I understand Senator Kroon has a bill dealing with this subject as well. What your amendment doesn't address is the renter's credit, and of course renters pay proportionately just as much property taxes as others, and through, because it's a different class rate, they're probably paying more. And I would hope that you would bring this approach, because one of the good things about this is that it is not having $40 million go into LGA, or which is just a general aid to local governments. It's giving it directly to individuals, which is the same purpose of Senator Port's bill. I will be voting no, but I certainly am sympathetic to how we can go about when we have the omnibus tax bill, which I would hope you support, but I don't anticipate that actually you will, but who knows? And bring it back then. Any other comments? Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not rising to the bait, just responding. I think it's important to take note of the fact that in the last 3.5 years, this legislature has expanded the market value homestead exclusion, has contributed to the circuit breaker forms of relief, has supported local government aid, has worked on the senior deferral, the agricultural property tax considerations that we had a lot of talk about a few days ago, reformed the renter's credit. I think you point out rightly that this is a glaring omission in this. So I think all told, if we add everything up that we've done in terms of bringing property taxes down and providing property tax increase relief, taking that on as a state responsibility, has been substantial. It approaches $600 to $750 million. So, you know, we've done a lot, and then that has not yet been recognized in this discussion.
Further discussion? of
More needs
the-
to be done. I agree with you. I'm sensitive to the increases that are occurring, but we've done a lot.
Thank you, Senator Dibble, Senator Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Senator Drazkowski for bringing this amendment forward. One of the issues that I am hearing a lot about from the constituents I have the honor of representing in southeastern Minnesota is the increase in property taxes. So I appreciate this amendment. I will be supporting it. And just to your earlier comments, Madam Chair, about the omnibus tax bill, I hope I can support that omnibus tax bill. Of course, we don't know what's in it at this point, but if it provides direct tax relief to hardworking Minnesotans, there's a very good chance that I will be looking forward to supporting that tax bill because, again, whether it's property tax relief or income tax relief or other tax relief, we are hearing from a lot of hardworking Minnesotans who are having trouble just affording their everyday lives right now with all the increased costs here in Minnesota. So I hope we can support the omnibus tax bill and look forward to working with you to put that together.
Anyone else? Senator Nelson,
Oh, thank you.
to the A19.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I too appreciate the A19. This is the number one thing that I'm hearing from folks all across my district is the concern with, yes, affordability in general, but specifically the increase in property taxes. And we've already discussed that a little bit. Madam Chair, I also appreciated your comments about the omission in the A19, that it did not include the renter's tax credit as a participant in the A19 amendment. And I'm not clear if this is something that staff could put together, but I would amend the A19 with the renter's tax credit provision as well. And I'd ask Madam Chair if staff could, if that is something they could ready for today, or if that's something that would need to be on the Senate floor. But I would offer that amendment to the Drazkowski A19.
Senator Drazkowski, I want, would you be amenable to setting this aside momentarily so that Senator Nelson's suggestion could be added to include the rent credit? Or do you prefer to keep it as it is?
My preference would be to keep it the way it is, Madam Chair. The renter's credit became an income tax credit in the last couple of years. It would be very difficult to write that amendment. And as a matter of fact, I might have considered including it in here if we had had more time. But
Okay.
so it's not something we can do on the fly here today.
So Senator Nelson, would you mind then not offering an amendment and considering it when we come to the omnibus bill?
Yes, Madam Chair, I will not offer that amendment to the A19. I realize it'd be difficult to implement right now at this table, but I do remain highly supportive of that renter's tax credit as well, though, as I will be supporting the A19. This is something that is very important to people all across my district. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Is there further discussion of the A19? Clerk will take the roll.
Chair Rest.
No.
Senator Housechild,
No.
Senator Hemmingson Yeager,
No.
Senator Miller. Aye. Senator Nelson,
Yes.
Senator Putnam,
No.
Senator Weber.
I didn't get to vote,
Yeah,
Madam.
Senator Drazkowski.
I vote aye.
I've not been,
Senator Dibble.
no.
There being 4 ayes and 5 noes, the amendment is not adopted. Are there other amendments to be offered? Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move the A22 amendment, and it needs to be distributed.
The pages will distribute the amendment. Please give the first copy to Senator Port. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, the A22 amendment provides for a one-time income tax rebate to residents of St. Louis, Stearns, Sherburne, or Benton County. I thought those would be good counties to begin with, Madam Chair. And it does it by allocating it to those taxpayers based on their proportion of the sum of the taxable income in those particular jurisdictions. We have very, very high income taxes across all brackets in this state that's making it unlivable for people to be here. We got to encourage people to come back to Minnesota again, especially to Senator Putnam's and Senator Hochschild's district. They, I think, would like to see income taxes cut, and so this is a particular favorable amendment for them, as well as me. I love the notion of cutting income taxes, and we haven't had a chance to do it here for the last 3 years because instead of income tax cuts, we've been entertaining income tax increases. Or tax increases generally, I should say. So that's the bill, Madam Chair. This would help liberate hardworking Minnesotans who are struggling to make it under one-party rule here in the state of Minnesota. I encourage your vote and ask for a roll call, Madam Chair.
There'll be a roll call. Discussion. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the A22 amendment.
All right, I have a sheet ready this time. Senator Rest.
No.
Senator Housechild. No. Senator Hemmingson Yeager.
No.
Senator Weber.
Yes.
Senator Dibble.
No.
Senator Drazkowski.
Aye.
Senator Miller. Aye. Senator Nelson.
Yes.
Senator Putnam.
No.
4 and 5.
There being 4 ayes and 5 noes, the amendment, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. I was concerned about line 121, by the way, for this amendment. Are there other amendments? Senator Weber. Senator Drazkowski, I'm sorry, did you have any others? Okay. Senator Weber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move the A23 amendment.
The pages will distribute the A23. First copy goes to Senator Port. And Senator Port, I'm not calling on you to comment because these are strictly tax issues so far. Senator Weber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Basically, the A23 amendment deletes Section 1 of the Delete Everything Amendment, and it splits the $40 million to $20 million for one-time supplemental city aid and $20 million for one-time supplemental county program aid to be paid out in the formula that is been already established. And this would be able to go to those local units of government, and if their need is to provide additional rental assistance, they will obviously be able to do that. And if their needs have been created by actions of this legislature in the last 3 years, they'd be able to use it for that purpose as well.
Thank you, Senator Weber. By deleting Section 1, Senator Port, that is the basis of your bill, and but still using the same dollars from the Tyler settlement. Just want to make sure that
Correct.
that I'm understanding that correctly. Senator Weber, did you want a roll call?
Yes, roll call, please.
Thank you. Discussion of the, or questions of Senator Weber by members. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Senator Rust?
No.
Senator Hauschild? Senator Weber?
Aye.
Senator Hemmingson Yeager?
No.
Senator Dibble?
No.
Senator Drazkowski?
Aye.
Senator Hauschild? I already asked. Senator Miller? Senator Nelson?
Aye.
Senator Putnam?
No.
There being 4 ayes and 5 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. Are there other amendments that you members may want to? Okay, so we'll have final discussion. There will be a roll call, and the motion will be when we get to taking that, to understand that because of the data privacy provisions, both Senator Port and I have been in contact with the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and there is a request that it be referred to Judiciary, so that the motion will be, the final motion will be to pass Senate File 3596 as amended and be referred to the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety. For final comments, are there members in the committee that would like to make final comments? And then the final comment will be to the bill's author, Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would encourage a no vote on this bill as it attempts to move forward. This bill simply redistributes wealth to illegal aliens, to people who decide not to work. Members, we already have a plethora of welfare programs. If the argument is that these people have a financial hardship, which in the bill is not even defined, I don't know what, I wish we had a definition, Senator Port, for financial hardship, but maybe that's the design of this whole thing. But we have all kinds of welfare programs in this state that provide for continuous income streams for people who meet those requirements of those programs. So I can't see where people who are on welfare would be impacted by the activities, however we define them, in the Twin Cities, and Minneapolis and St. Paul are seemingly dysfunctional cities in this state for the last 2 or 3 months. I can't see how those particular populations would be impacted in their ability to pay rent. If people were workers, they qualify for the Minnesota paid family leave program, which provides for days off work and paychecks for people who have mental and emotional health problems. That seems to me to fit exactly what this is designed to do. And as I mentioned, Madam Chair, this bill will provide in Hennepin County over $7,000 to households, some of which are very likely illegal aliens, because I don't think ICE was able to scoop up all the illegal aliens in our state. As a matter of fact, I know they haven't been able to. Not to mention maybe the number of criminal illegal aliens that are still here. So, Madam Chair, members, I encourage a no vote, and thank you for allowing me to talk this time, Madam Chair.
Certainly. Any other comments? Senator Ford.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I appreciate your consideration today. We are on the edge of an eviction crisis in Minnesota. This bill is intended to address that all across the state to keep people stably housed. We know it's the way that we get the best outcomes in education and economic opportunity and in healthcare when people have a home. I appreciate this committee's consideration of this bill and the discussion today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Port. Any other comments? The motion by Senator Hauschild is that Senate File 3596, as amended, be recommended to pass and referred to the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety. The clerk will take the roll.
Senator Rust,
Yes.
Senator Hauschild,
Yes.
Senator Weber,
No.
Senator Hemmingson Yeager,
Aye.
Senator Dibble,
Yes.
Senator Drazkowski,
No.
Senator Miller. No. Senator Nelson. No. Senator Putnam.
Yes.
5 and 4.
There being 5 ayes and 4 noes, the motion prevails, and the bill is passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator Miller and members. Tomorrow, the agenda is again one bill, and it is about extending the provisions of pass-through entities. And so we will begin again at 8:30. I'm hoping for that bill that we have unanimous ayes. Thank you very much. We stand adjourned.